You didn't just watch a routine royal update today. You watched a system reach its absolute breaking point. A future king, Prince William, a man who has spent his entire life being the rock of the monarchy, has just done the unthinkable. He withdrew. This wasn't about a simple schedule conflict or a temporary illness. It was a reaction to a secret, a hidden reality about Princess Kate's highly anticipated return that has remained locked behind the heavy gates of the palace until now. I've watched this pattern in every fragile institution that's more afraid of the truth than a scandal. Tonight, I am going to walk you through what really happened in that silence, the moment the polished palace lines failed, and why William chose Kate over the entire palace machine. For months, the official narrative was clear: privacy, space, recovery. They told us Kate's return was the light at the end of the tunnel, a beacon of stability for a monarchy that feels increasingly mortal. But you don't lose sight of a princess for months by accident. You don't keep canceling a future king's schedule for personal reasons that remain unexplained without a deeper crisis brewing. The truth is, the palace didn't just manage the optics, they tried to control reality itself. But tonight, that control has evaporated. William has discovered something about Kate's condition, or perhaps about the way her return was being orchestrated, that made him turn his back on his royal duties. Think about the pressure on William. He is the bridge between the ancient traditions of his father and the modern expectations of a world that demands transparency. For years, he's been the loyal soldier of the palace machine. But what happens when that machine threatens the woman he loves? Meghan and Harry may have left for freedom, but William stayed to protect the institution. However, the discovery he just made has changed the rules of the game entirely. If a king-in-waiting has to overrule his entire court just to protect his wife's dignity, we are no longer looking at a fairy tale monarchy. We are looking at a system in crisis, where the emotional center, Kate, is far more fragile than anyone in power wanted to admit out loud. Have you ever felt that sinking feeling when you realize the people you trust are hiding the full story? That is exactly what is happening in Britain right now. What was the specific secret? Was it a medical setback that the palace tried to gloss over? Or was it a leak from within the hospital walls, whispers of unexpected complications that were never supposed to reach William's ears? The reports coming in suggest a private confrontation where William reportedly said, "No more hiding." What did he see at Kate's bedside that terrified him more than bad headlines? Why did he choose to withdraw now, when the monarchy needs him most? To understand why William finally withdrew, we have to look back at the void that started this all. It began with a simple sentence from the palace, a surgery that was described as planned and successful. But in the weeks that followed, that success turned into a deafening silence. There were no reassurance photos, no hospital window waves, and most tellingly, a sudden, unexplained void in the future king's diary. For months, Princess Kate simply vanished from public life, leaving a vacuum that was quickly filled by rumors and conspiracy theories. The palace machine retreated behind its favorite shield, privacy. But as any political observer knows, there is a thin, dangerous line between respecting a person's private recovery and a public institution managing a crisis by withholding the truth. The warning signs were everywhere if you knew where to look. You don't lose sight of a central figure like Kate for months by accident. During this time, William's own behavior began to shift. He canceled major engagements at the last possible second, citing personal matters that felt increasingly heavy. It wasn't just a husband taking time off. It was a man who seemed to be realizing that the palace spin was no longer enough to cover the reality of what was happening behind closed doors. Then came the moment that shattered the public's trust: the faked photos. In a desperate attempt to prove everything was fine, the palace released images that were clearly manipulated, a move that only proved they were more afraid of the truth than of a scandal. This wasn't transparency. It was truth being dragged out at the last possible moment. This period of silence wasn't a tactical choice for Kate's benefit. It was institutional panic. While the world was told to wait for her return, William was reportedly dealing with the fallout of a system that prioritized optics over human vulnerability. The question we have to ask is, what did he discover during those months of silence that finally broke his loyalty to the palace script? If the monarchy is to survive in a world that watched this suffering in real time, it has to stop pretending nothing ever breaks behind palace walls. William's withdrawal is the final admission that the machine's silence had a devastating cost, both for his wife and for the public's faith in the crown. As we move behind the heavy palace gates, we find a world of leaks, whispers, and internal warfare. The London clinic was supposed to be a fortress of privacy, but in the age of digital information, secrets have a way of seeping through the cracks. While the official line from Buckingham Palace maintained that Kate's surgery was planned and successful, the murmurs from within the hospital told a far more complex story. Sources began to whisper about unexpected complications, details that were never meant to reach the public, yet were starting to reach William's ears. William was caught in a brutal crossfire. On one side stood the men in gray suits, royal advisors who believed that maintaining a perfect image was more important than admitting human frailty. On the other side was the raw, painful reality of his wife's recovery. The tension reached a boiling point when an internal email reportedly began to circulate with a subject line that shattered the palace's calm. "She deserves more than silence." This was the moment the mask truly slipped, revealing a deep rift between those who wanted to protect the monarchy and those who wanted to protect the woman at its heart. This was the turning point where the machine began to fail. King Charles, despite his own battle with illness, reportedly stepped in after seeing the toll this secrecy was taking on his son. He made a decision that broke decades of royal protocol. Charles, moved by Kate's vulnerability, reportedly told his advisors that there would be no more hiding. He realized that when the person who humanizes the crown is suffering, pretending everything is fine is not just a lie, it's a tactical error that could destroy the institution itself. William's discovery of the secret complications and the internal push to keep them hidden reportedly led to an explosive confrontation. This wasn't just about bad headlines. It was about the realization that the palace machine was willing to sacrifice Kate's peace of mind for the sake of optics. When William reportedly shouted, "No more hiding," he wasn't just making a statement. He was making a confession that the system had reached its limit. He was choosing the truth over the fairy tale, a move that would eventually force Kate to take matters into her own hands. But what did he see at that bedside that terrified him more than any scandal? Was it the realization that her return was being used as a prop to stabilize a shaky monarchy? The withdrawal we are seeing now is the aftershock of that realization. William has seen the gears of the machine from the inside, and he has decided that he will no longer be a part of a script that ignores the cost paid by actual human beings. This isn't just about a princess fighting cancer. It's about a husband finally deciding that the truth, however painful, is the only way forward. The moment King Charles stepped through the doors of the clinic to visit his daughter-in-law, the internal dynamics of the British monarchy shifted forever. This was a man who had lived his entire life governed by protocol, a king who understood better than anyone that the crown must always win. But as he stood by Kate's bedside, he reportedly saw a reality that no palace statement could polish away. He didn't see a planned and successful recovery. He saw the human cost of a system that was still trying to play by the rules of the 19th century while facing a 21st century crisis. Charles, himself battling cancer, found a shared vulnerability with Kate that transcended their royal titles. It was in this private, quiet room that the palace machine finally broke. Reports suggest that Charles became visibly emotional, realizing that the silence his advisors were so desperately maintaining was not protecting Kate, it was suffocating her. When a man who has lived by protocol for over 7 decades finally says enough, it means the situation has moved far beyond the reach of public relations. This was the moment Charles decided to overrule his entire court. The advisors, the so-called men in gray suits, were still arguing for optics and continuity, fearing that admitting the severity of the situation would show a weakened monarchy. But Charles saw the cracks in the walls of his own house. He realized that you cannot fix a crumbling foundation by simply hanging a new, beautiful painting over the cracks. He reportedly slammed his hand on the table and issued a command that sent shockwaves through the institution. No more hiding. This was more than a change in PR strategy. It was a rejection of the never complain, never explain mantra that had defined the Windsors for generations. Charles understood that the monarchy doesn't just manage feelings, it manages perception. And right then, the perception was one of cold, calculated secrecy. By choosing honesty, Charles was attempting to save the institution from itself. He saw that the public's trust was a fragile clock, and the gears inside were grinding to a halt because they refused to admit they were worn down. What did Charles see that terrified him more than bad headlines? He saw a future where the people would no longer believe the palace, even when they told the truth. He saw that the silence was creating a curiosity loop that was becoming toxic. By ordering the truth to be told, Charles was effectively breaking the machine to save the family. He was telling the world that while the crown is an ancient institution, the people wearing it are flesh and blood, capable of bleeding and suffering just like anyone else. This was the catalyst for everything that followed the joint statements, the sudden shift in tone, and eventually, Kate's own decision to speak. But for William, this was a double-edged sword. While his father had broken the machine, William was the one who had to deal with the aftermath of what was finally revealed. The secret Charles unearthed by Kate's bedside wasn't just about medicine. It was about the realization that the fairy tale monarchy was officially dead, and a much harsher reality was taking its place. You didn't just watch a routine royal update. You watched a human soul step out from behind the velvet curtains to reclaim her own story. For 94 seconds, the world stood still as Princess Kate sat on a simple garden bench, delivering a message that no palace spokesperson could ever replicate. This wasn't a polished announcement from the men in gray suits. It was a display of fragile honesty that shattered the cold, institutional spin that had defined the previous months. Kate gave the public what the palace machine never could: raw, unfiltered vulnerability. The contrast between the two worlds was absolute. For weeks, the palace had issued sterile, robotic updates about planned and successful procedures. But those 94 seconds revealed a much harsher truth. When Kate confirmed she was undergoing preventative chemotherapy, it wasn't just a medical update, it was a confession. It proved that the system had been hiding the severity of her condition for far longer than anyone wanted to admit. Her voice, though steady, carried the immense weight of a woman fighting for her life, while simultaneously trying to protect her children's peace. William, watching from the sidelines, saw the immediate impact of this push back against traditional royal protocol. He realized that the palace's attempts to control reality had failed, and only Kate's warm, human touch could repair the damage. The secret he had been grappling with, the realization that her return was being used as a prop for stability, was finally laid bare. Kate didn't just update her medical status, she rewrote the monarchy's entire script in real time, forcing an ancient institution to finally admit that it can bleed. This video served as a curiosity loop, brought to a sudden, emotional resolution. It proved that while the monarchy can manage perception, it can never truly manage the human heart. By speaking directly to the cameras, Kate shifted from being a subject of gossip to a beacon of empathy, showing the world how to handle a crisis with true dignity. For William, seeing his wife so exposed yet so strong was the final catalyst for his withdrawal. He realized the fairy tale image was gone forever, replaced by a mortal reality that demanded his full, undivided presence. The news of Princess Kate's remission wasn't just a medical update. It was a moment that fundamentally reshaped the future of the British monarchy. While the world saw poetic family footage and felt a collective sense of relief, the reality behind those polished frames was far more sobering. For Prince William, the word remission didn't mean cured. It meant a fragile, high-stakes balance that he was now determined to protect at any cost. This was the secret that drove his sudden and shocking withdrawal. The realization that Kate's recovery is a tightrope, not a finish line. The internal fallout at the palace following this news was immediate. While royal advisors, the men in gray suits, viewed Kate's remission as a green light to restart the PR machine and bolster the crown's shaky image, William stood his ground with a definitive no. He had seen the gears of the institution grinding toward a plan that would place Kate back in the spotlight for the sake of stability, regardless of the long-term toll on her health. William's withdrawal was a direct strike against a system that he now believes is willing to treat his wife as a public relations asset rather than a human being. This confrontation has birthed what is being whispered about as the Kate Protocol. For the first time in modern history, the ancient traditions of the crown have been forced to yield to the needs of a single individual. Under this new rule, Kate's schedule is no longer dictated by state banquets or centuries-old obligations, but solely by her own physical and emotional capacity. William has effectively staged a quiet revolution within the palace walls, declaring that the survival of the monarchy now depends on Kate's well-being, and he will never again risk her health for a diplomatic photo-op. Imagine the immense pressure William faces, caught between a public that is desperate for the return of the princess and the stark reality of a recovery journey marked by fatigue and risk. His withdrawal isn't an abandonment of his duty, it is a profound redefinition of it. He is protecting the emotional heart of his family from being crushed by the relentless machinery of the state. To William, the hidden truth about Kate's permanent shift in role is a burden he is willing to carry, even if it means facing public criticism for his perceived absence. This crisis has exposed how terrifyingly thin the line is between institutional survival and personal tragedy. By choosing to build a fortress around his wife, William is demonstrating that he understands the true cost of power better than any of his predecessors. As the secret of Kate's restricted role begins to leak, the palace faces a haunting question. Can a monarchy sustain itself when its brightest star is no longer a full-time public figure? William has already made his choice, and the world is now watching a future king who has prioritized the woman he loves over the machine he was born to lead. The heavy oak doors of the palace don't just keep the public out, they trap a brewing war inside. Behind the scenes of Prince William's sudden withdrawal, a violent rift has opened between the future king and the men in gray suits, the powerful advisors who have dictated royal life for decades. For these traditionalists, the monarchy is a machine that must keep running at all costs. But for William, the discovery he made about the pressure being placed on Kate has turned that loyalty into open defiance. This isn't just a family disagreement, it is a total collapse of the institutional trust that has held the Windsors together since the days of Queen Elizabeth. The friction began when the palace machine tried to set a hard deadline for Kate's return to full-time duties. Advisors argued that with King Charles sidelined by his own illness, the public needed the perfect image of the Princess of Wales to maintain the illusion of stability. But William saw exactly what that perfect image was, costing his wife in private. He reportedly discovered that while he was focusing on her recovery, his own staff were drafting schedules that would have seen Kate back on her feet far before her body was ready. To William, this was the ultimate betrayal, the realization that the institution he was born to lead was willing to burn out its brightest star just to keep the headlines positive. This was the moment the loyal soldier finally broke. For years, William has been the bridge between the old world and the new, but he has now officially chosen his wife over the palace's archaic rules. Reports of explosive confrontations in the private offices suggest that William has fundamentally rejected the never complain, never explain mantra. He is no longer asking for permission to protect Kate, he is demanding it. By tearing up the pre-written scripts and canceling engagements without notice, he has effectively paralyzed the palace's ability to spin the narrative. He has sent a clear message to the advisors. If the crown cannot protect its own family, then the crown is no longer his priority. Think about the courage it takes to stand against a system that has existed for 1,000 years. William is facing immense pressure from within, being told that his absence is damaging the prestige of the monarchy, but he understands a deeper truth that the advisors are too blind to see. A monarchy that lacks humanity is a monarchy that has no future. He has seen the human cost of the stiff upper lip policy, and he refuses to let Kate become another victim of the institution's coldness. His withdrawal is a protective shield, a refusal to let his wife be treated as a pawn in a high-stakes game of public relations. As this internal warfare intensifies, the secret of William's defiance is beginning to leak into the public consciousness. People are starting to ask why the strong, silent prince has suddenly become so unreachable. The answer lies in the harsh reality of what he witnessed behind those clinic walls. A system that was ready to sacrifice a person for a crown. William has made his choice, and it is a choice that will permanently change the way the British monarchy operates. He is no longer playing by their rules, and the men in grey suits are realizing, too late, that the future king is willing to let the machine stall if it means saving the woman he loves. To truly understand the iron-fisted nature of Prince William's withdrawal, we have to look beyond the clinical reports and the palace memos. We have to look at the shadow of a woman who isn't there, but whose presence felt heavier than ever during those weeks of silence. William isn't just fighting a modern media crisis. He is fighting a ghost. He is fighting the 30-year-old scar of a mother who was crushed, discarded, and ultimately consumed by the very same palace machine that he was born to lead. When William discovered the secret pressure being placed on Kate to perform her recovery for the cameras, he didn't see a modern princess in 2025. He saw his mother in 1992. This is the psychological vital point that the palace advisors completely failed to account for. They thought they were dealing with a disciplined heir who would eventually fall in line with tradition. Instead, they triggered the primal protective instincts of a son who watched his mother, Princess Diana, beg for a shred of humanity from an institution that only cared about the stiff upper lip. The moment William realized that his own staff were drafting return schedules for Kate while she was still at her most vulnerable, the bridge to the past was set on fire. His withdrawal is a vow made in blood. Never again. For William, the secrecy he encountered wasn't just about medical privacy. It was a hauntingly familiar pattern of institutional coldness. He remembers the days when Diana was told to just get on with it, even as her mental and physical health spiraled. When he reportedly saw the cold, calculated way the machine was preparing to use Kate's remission as a prop to stabilize the crown, he didn't just get angry, he became immovable. His refusal to cooperate with the established PR script is his way of telling the palace that the blood of the past will not be spilled again in the name of continuity. This iron-fisted protection is why he has become so unreachable to even his father's most senior aides. He has seen the human cost of the fairy tale, and he knows that once the machine starts grinding, it doesn't stop until it has extracted everything. By choosing to withdraw, he is effectively acting as the wall between Kate and the vultures. He has realized that the palace hasn't actually changed since the 90 seconds. It has only become more efficient at hiding its lack of empathy. To the advisors, William's behavior looks like defiance. But to anyone who remembers Diana, it looks like justice. Think about the weight of that choice. William is the future king, yet he is willing to let the prestige of the crown suffer if it means saving the woman he loves from the same fate as his mother. He is rejecting the loyal soldier role because he knows that loyalty to a machine that kills the soul is a form of betrayal. As he sits by Kate's side, far from the flashbulbs and the state banquets, he is finally breaking the cycle of royal trauma. He is making it clear that while he will one day wear the crown, he will never allow the crown to wear down his family. The secret he discovered wasn't just a medical complication, it was the realization that the men in gray suits are still playing the same dangerous game they played 30 years ago. They still view royal wives as expendable assets. But this time, the heir to the throne isn't a passive bystander. He is a man haunted by a memory and fueled by a singular, unshakable purpose: to ensure that Kate's story has a different ending than Diana's. The withdrawal we are seeing now is the final, loudest no in the history of the House of Windsor. The global fallout from Prince William's withdrawal has triggered a seismic shift in how the world views the British monarchy. For decades, the international community looked at the Windsors as a symbol of unwavering duty, a machine that never stopped, regardless of personal grief. But as the news of William's iron-fisted protection of Kate spreads from London to New York and from Sydney to Tokyo, the narrative is no longer about royal absence. It is about a fundamental change in the moral fabric of the crown. The public is witnessing something they haven't seen in 1,000 years. A future king who is openly choosing the human heart over the institutional crown. This global reaction has created a massive curiosity loop that the palace can no longer control. In the United States, where the audience values family and individual integrity above all else, William's choice is being met with a new kind of respect. People are no longer just consuming royal stories as gossip. They are recognizing a man who has decided that his wife's life is not a commodity for public consumption. The brand Kate is no longer just about fashion or grace. It has become a symbol of a family fighting for its right to be human in an inhuman system. The secret William discovered, that the institution was ready to sacrifice Kate's peace for stability, has turned the public into his greatest ally. However, within the diplomatic circles of the Commonwealth, the fallout is much more complex. Traditionalists are panicking, fearing that if the future king doesn't show up for the state banquets and the military parades, the very idea of the monarchy will dissolve. They argue that visibility is the only currency of a king. But William has countered this with a much more powerful currency: authenticity. He has realized that a monarchy that survives by lying to its people and breaking its own members is a monarchy that isn't worth saving. His withdrawal is a global declaration that the old rules of appearances at all costs are officially dead. The public perception has shifted from "Where is Kate?" to "Why did the palace try to hide her struggle?" This shift has left the royal advisors in a defensive crouch. They are realizing that by trying to protect the image of the monarchy, they have actually damaged its reputation. William's defiance has forced the public to pick a side, and the overwhelming majority is choosing the husband who stays by his wife's bedside over the institution that wants her back on a stage. This is a PR nightmare for the palace, because they can no longer play the duty card against a man who is performing the ultimate duty: protecting his family. As we look at the global headlines, we see the beginning of a next-level monarchy. It is a system that is being dragged, kicking and screaming, into a world where transparency and empathy are the new standards of power. William is the architect of this change. By withdrawing, he hasn't just gone quiet. He has become the loudest voice for a new way of leading. He is showing that a leader's greatest strength isn't his ability to hide his pain, but his courage to acknowledge it. The secret of Kate's return is now common knowledge. She will return on her own terms, or she won't return at all. And for the first time, the world is perfectly okay with that. The fallout has reached a point of no return. The men in gray suits are watching their influence evaporate, as William ignores their memos and cancels their meticulously planned events. He has broken the machine's most powerful tool: the ability to manufacture consent. The public now knows that if William isn't there, it's because something more important is happening behind the scenes. He has trained the world to look for the truth, not the spin. This is the ultimate twist. The palace tried to manage William, but William ended up resetting the entire monarchy. This withdrawal by Prince William wasn't an end. It was a profound beginning. It marks the definitive birth of a new era for the British monarchy, one where the firm has finally been replaced by the family. By standing his ground and prioritizing Kate's health over centuries of tradition, William has successfully dismantled the cold, impenetrable wall that once separated the royals from the people they serve. We are no longer looking at remote, untouchable figures. We are looking at a couple that has survived the fire and emerged more authentic than ever before. The secret that once threatened to tear the palace apart has instead become its greatest strength. That secret was the simple, undeniable truth that even a future king and queen are vulnerable. By refusing to hide that vulnerability any longer, William and Kate have reset the monarchy's social contract with the public. They have proven that duty does not require the sacrifice of one's soul or health. The Kate Protocol is now the blueprint for the future: transparency, empathy, and a fierce protection of personal boundaries. As Kate continues her journey on her own terms, the men in gray suits have been forced to retreat. The power has shifted from the bureaucrats back to the heirs. This crisis has shown us that the monarchy's survival in the 21st century doesn't depend on how many ribbons are cut or how many banquets are held, but on the depth of the connection they share with the public. William has shown us what a modern king looks like. A man who leads with his heart as much as his head, and a man who understands that his first and most sacred duty is to the woman he loves. We are witnessing the dawn of a humanized crown. The scars of the past, from the tragedies of Diana to the modern battles with illness, have finally been woven into the fabric of the institution, making it stronger and more relatable. The silence has been broken, the secrets have been laid bare, and what remains is a resilient, modern family ready to lead with a new kind of authority, one based on truth rather than artifice. So, as we close this chapter, ask yourself, do you prefer this new, vulnerable monarchy, or do you miss the polished mystery of the past? William's withdrawal was the loudest statement he ever made, and it has ensured that when Kate finally makes her full return, it will be to a world that respects her as a woman first and a princess second. The machine has been broken, and in its place, a real family has finally found its voice.